Now, welcome everyone today to our franchise discovery webinar. Today's webinar is with Source Franchise. We have Chris Kirkwood, who's the managing director of Source, on with us today, and then we have one of their franchisees, Keith Smith. Welcome, guys. And then we also have Jerry Foley, as usual, who will take it over from here. And then if anyone has any questions, they can put them in the bottom right corner there. There's a question box. You can put in any questions there. And at the end, I'll put them to the guys. So over to you, Jerry.
Thanks very much, and hello to Chris and the other Keith. Chris, I'm going to start with you because you joined Source back in 2018, and we'll be talking about the way in which it scaled up the business significantly in the years since then. But you were no stranger to the property world yourself, although as an individual, and you've been quite open about some of the successes, but some of the mistakes you made. So tell us about why people seem to think property is an easy business to be in.
Oh, it's crazy, isn't it? That is a common conversation that we have with people who want to get into property, and I'm sure Keith will be rolling his eyes as well for all the times that he's heard that property is an easy thing to get into. Yeah. So before I started with Source only started in 2017, so I came on board just a couple of months after it started, and I came on board as a trainer, and I was before Source. I was originally doing training for in the property world, because I'd been involved in property for about 5 to 10 years before that. And out of those 5 to 10 years, I'd say pretty much 50% of my time was failing, getting it wrong, but always having that mindset of, I've got it wrong once, I need to adjust the way that I do things, and I need to keep on, banging my head against that brick wall. And eventually the brick wall lost and my head won, and I knocked down that brick wall. And I'd found the way to make money out of different strategies in property. I started off with buy to let, and I'm sure anybody that's done buy to let has had the same experience, where you buy a property, you rent it out, you think you've done, you've achieved everything that you want to achieve, you pat yourself on the back, and you wait for the money to start rolling in, and then months and months go by, and you start looking at your bank statements, and you think, well, I'm only making £100 a month. This isn't right. Where's my Aston Martin? Why am I not in the south of France? This is not the way that property should be. But yeah, a lot of failing before I started to find success, and then bringing that into Sourced. And I think the reason that we have scaled in Sourced so quickly is because we give people all the benefits of that experience, all the benefits of all the failures that we've had. And that's what we've used to construct our training program to then give to these guys to say, look, and in our training program, we don't just talk about the good stuff. We tell them about the bad stuff as well. We tell them about all the failures that we've had. We're completely transparent with that, because in order to avoid the failures for themselves, they need to know what they are. So we give them absolutely all the information and the wealth of our experience, and then these guys can move forward. But yeah, a lot of failures and a lot of determination is required for property. Absolutely.
Well, that sounds like a good time to bring in Keith Smith, because it's almost coming up to your first anniversary as a franchisee. What was it like in terms of the training? Did you get that transparency, that openness to saying, we're going to give you a system, we're going to give you some structures, but you have to be aware of the pitfalls as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If I think back to it, I was November last year, I was on my induction. So, 3 days at head office. So Chris and various members of the team, take you through all the strategies, kind of blow your mind. But then there's also like loads and loads of online materials. So I would say after that, I spent majority of December kind of just working my way through all those online trainings and getting everything into my head really. And through that, there is a real strong view of, look, you can't just expect to turn up today, tomorrow, buy a property, and the day after be making profit. It doesn't work like that. You have to have hard work, resilience. You need to find the finance, and you need to listen. You need to listen to the benefit of our experience and follow the process. And I think through that, I'm not saying I've spent a year now. I did the training and it was perfect because I knew all the pitfalls. You make mistakes. I've made mistakes. I don't mind admitting it, and my bank balance knows it. But at the same time, you learn far more from your mistakes, obviously, don't you? So you don't want to make those mistakes again. But also, what it does is it fuels you to make it for things that go right. So, I've spent quite a bit of time this year on things that maybe haven't come off, but also, an equal amount of time on things that have. So yeah, it's a real balancing act and just taking on that experience of the other people, which is why it's great to be in the franchise.
I think one of the difficult things, if you don't mind me just coming back in, is that in property, right, the top 0.01% of people achieve phenomenal results. There's a guy I met about 10 years ago, and he wrote a book, and it was his first ever book. And that book was, I made £1 million from my first ever property development. Right. And, brilliant for him. I'm really pleased for him. And I didn't read the book, to be transparent, but if he's then given people the idea that they can do the same, that fundamentally isn't what we're all about. We're about setting sensible goals, setting sensible activity levels, and coming up with a credible and achievable growth path when people join the franchise to when they leave. And obviously that depends on where they start and whether they start from zero or whether they've got previous property experience. So yeah, it's I think we suffer a little bit because we're very, very realistic when people join us. We suffer a little bit from the other sort of hype, I would say, that's surrounding.
Yeah, and just on that, Chris, because there is a lot of hype. I like the use of the word sensible, because you pick up a paper every day, every month for the last 20, 30 years, and either we're on the verge of a boom or we're on the verge of a collapse. I think it is fair to say that there's been a lot of volatility over the last 2 or 3 years, genuine volatility. So I suppose the most basic question of all, is this a good time to be thinking of getting into the property business with the help of Sourced?
Absolutely. Look, there's always an opportunity within property, and I think one of the things that I'm very proud of, for example, the inflation rates came out again today, didn't they?
Yeah.
So one of the things on my agenda for this afternoon is to record a short video and put it into our internal our intranet, so that the franchisees can see what our take on that inflation, because inflation stagnated for the first month. And obviously the property is very affected by inflation, and then how interest rates are set, and then that affects the
and
property
building costs as well. I mean, we've seen that's
Absolutely.
been a perennial topic over the last few years. Everything has gone up so rapidly.
Which was affected by both COVID and Brexit, right? Which a double whammy hitting those building costs. Absolutely. So the strategy that you would use at any one time might be different from the strategy that you would choose 2 years ago. Now, to have that flexibility and to have that versatility is a massive benefit that we give all of our guys. Because Keith, let's take Keith as the example. When he came on a year ago, he sat down with his support person and he made a plan. Now, if he'd have made that plan 2 years ago, that might have been a different plan. And every month, Keith has the opportunity to sit down with his support person and review that plan and review the direction of where Keith is going. So at any point, he could choose if he wants to, and if his support person agrees, because we want to make sure that people aren't just getting shiny penny syndrome. But if Keith sits down and says, right, I think actually a rent-to-rent model would be more sensible for me at the minute because lending costs are so high. And if everybody agrees to that, then Keith can pivot. Keith can go on to all the rent-to-rent training that we provide, including the face-to-face stuff. He can build his knowledge, and then he can deliver that knowledge with the help of his support person. So absolutely, there's always a way in property to build your personal wealth. It's just understanding what is available to you. That is where the key rests. Understand what's available and make sensible decisions about the direction that you're going. And that's what we try to provide for our guys, because we take on people that have got zero experience, got lots of experience. We can help all of them either start or scale their property wealth.
And Chris, we'll come back to some of those details in terms of what you actually provide in your training modules and the backup support. But you mentioned each new franchisee holder having a mentor source who gives business as well as general advice. And Keith, you've been saying that's something you've really taken advantage of, because from your point of view, you'd be kind of silly not to, because they're there to help you and they've seen it before and can point you in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, whilst I'd been a landlord before and had property and done a few properties up that I'd lived in, by no means was I making any kind of living or side hustle amount of money out of property. It was just probably a result of life circumstances, moving to different places and keeping some properties and, not keeping others. So, for me, if I think about what made the difference in joining Sourced. It was about the fact that I had a passion for property. I didn't quite know where the outlet for that passion was. Sourced came along at a time that I was looking at franchises in general, and the stars aligned. It was an opportunity to be able to get funding, to be able to get support, to be able to get access to investors, all the things that I thought I was going to need. And actually, I sort of talk about it as a soft landing, really. It was a soft landing into property for me, which meant I always had somebody to be able to call on. So, why wouldn't I do that? So I basically, I have a weekly check-in with my support person. Every month we have a more of an in-depth call. And then, every few months or every few weeks or so, I'll have a face-to-face, whether that's me going to a destination to meet them, or they come to me and we look at some property, or we might bash out a problem that we think we've got, or that I think I've got. I just see it as a resource that I'm just going to keep pulling on until they tell me, that's enough, you've had your share. But so far that time hasn't come. And I remember asking Chris that question in induction, which is like, when do you have to stop asking questions? When is it too much? And he was just like, keep going until they say no. So that's what I'm doing.
And congrats on keeping going. Chris, you've mentioned in the overview about there are different potential income streams, different potential capital gains elements available within the broader property portfolio. So tell us what the basic training is, and then how people decide, oh, that one looks like something I might be good at, that particular aspect of property management.
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I think this is something that a lot of people don't give enough time to. I wouldn't say get wrong, but they don't give enough time to. So the only training course that we insist that our franchisees come on is the first 3 days of induction, and that's held at HQ. And like Keith said, we go through all of the strategies on that day. We don't go through them in a huge amount of detail, but we explain what they are, explain what the benefits are, explain what the pitfalls are, explain how much time it'll take, and so on and so forth. After induction, they then sit down with their support person, and it should be the longest support session that they have, and it's done on a one-to-one basis. And then at that point, the support person finds out from that individual, what their personal situation is, what their ambition is, so where do they want to be in 12 months' time, how much money they've got in the pot to facilitate that, and what is the most pressing thing that they need. For example, if they've got a part-time job, or if they've got some income coming from somewhere else, then their pressing need isn't cash flow. Their pressing need might be to build, a big amount of wealth. So their support person will find out all of these things, and then between them, they'll discuss the opportunities that they have. So if somebody's looking for cash flow, for example, because they want to leave their day job, so they're dependent on the income from their day job, but they want to leave it. If they're dependent on that money, then they can replace that by income that they can make from property. So how would that get achieved? Well, they could do that by finding property deals and selling them on to investors. So we help them by, first of all, sending them property leads. And then when they have a deal that looks good, we put it out to our list of 130,000 investors, and we get them investors. So they can then sell those deals, and they can start generating that cash flow. So I'm aware that I've said previously that people hear about, like these big numbers and stuff that people make in property. And you need to be aware that not everybody, this doesn't affect everybody with the same success. But we have franchisees that are selling between 15 and 20 deals every single month. Average deal sells for about £5,000. So that's a very good amount of income. Now, we've targeted that franchisee specifically to spend all of their time on deal sourcing and trading them on, because they're very good salespeople. If a different franchisee came to us and said, wow, that guy's getting 20 deals a month and they're £5,000 each, that's what I want to do. And they weren't quite as good at, communicating, at selling, and going through that process of selling, we would have that conversation with them and say, listen, we, love your enthusiasm, but I don't think this strategy is for you because of X, Y, Z. We think that this will suit your personality far better to go off in this direction. So this direction might be, for example, building a rent-to-rent portfolio. And again, we can bring in the investors at any point, because building that rent-to-rent portfolio will take some cash to do it. And if this person doesn't have any cash in their pocket, they can raise it from investors in order to help them build this rent-to-rent portfolio in order to provide them cash flow. So all of these different models of creating whatever that individual needs, we've been through many, many, many times before and got it very well systemized and very well structured so that it's easy to understand. It's not easy to do, it's easy to understand. It just needs to be implemented by the person that comes on board with us.
Very important difference between being easy to do and easy to understand.
Absolutely.
Key point. And Keith Smith, what aspect of the property business, when you went to your 3-day induction seminar, what leaped off the page and saying, this is the area that I want to focus on? Or were you sort of juggling a few potentials when you came away from the conversation with Chris and his team?
Yeah, definitely juggling a few potentials, because you look at it all going, I could do all that. Of course I can. And then quite quickly you realise, I actually can't do all that because I don't have enough time. So, yeah, I would say if I were to show you, what did my first business plan look like that I'd kind of drawn up, it had a lot of things in it. And actually, what I've done over time is refine that with the support of the support workers. So, but immediately the first thing that I was interested in was like, how do I kind of like roll my sleeves up? Not sleeves rolled up. How do I roll my sleeves up and get into a renovation? And it was quite funny actually, because basically I ended up doing my kind of first support worker session. It was just in a little bit of a transition. So I had somebody who was new into the Source business, and their boss. They came with me to do some property viewings, which turned out to be a property which I ended up buying and renovating, and it's in the process of selling right now. Actually, it had a small bump in the road, but is now selling. So that was the first one. And while we were there, we then kind of crunched through, okay, how does the business plan? How should it look? So we need to be doing X amount of renovations a year alongside other, cash flowing strategies. So I'm quite clear now as to I've kind of got 3 areas that underpin what I'm looking for within property, so that and it feels controllable. Although at this stage, I'm still at the point of I've still got more to do. It's more to do than time I've got, but that's a healthy position to be in. So
good position to be in. And Chris, a big part of the attraction of the model, the overall model that Source has, is the amount of investment you've put into your IT systems, your bespoke IT systems, and also the investment app. Tell us a little bit about the app and why that's central really to what the offer is to the franchisees.
Yeah, so we built the app a couple of years ago now, and we know from an investor's point of view, because that's what we are investors. If you want to go and find a property, where exactly do you go? Well, currently you'd still go onto the online portals, which are dominated by residential sales and people that don't really understand the investment world, which is Rightmove, Zoopla, On the Market, and so on and so forth. So we wanted to build something where investors could go directly to our app and they could see investment properties that were marketed as investment properties with, all the investment figures already there, rather than having to go to Rightmove, then find the postcode and go down Google Maps to find the number of the street, and then go to the EPC register and get the details, and then go to Land Registry. We wanted something that brought everything together so that it was far easier for investors to go onto the app, download the app, put in what their criteria was, what they were looking for. So are they looking for HMOs? Are they looking for commercial conversions? Are they looking for flips? And then the app would then give them that information in their local area. So that's what we built. The only properties that go onto our app are properties that are being advertised by our franchisees. So if a franchisee wants to sell one of these properties, they put it on the app. We've got a huge amount of investors that are there looking at these properties, and then they can communicate with that franchisee directly through the app. So I don't know whether you've built any apps, but they're phenomenally expensive to build, especially when you've got that amount of sort of functionality in it.
Well, just on the functionality, Chris, because the amount of data analysis that has gone into the behind the scenes before it gets on the app. So you have all of that information, which is sort of corralled down into what's relevant to potential investors. I mean, that is a lot of work to get to the front of house, which is the investment app.
Absolutely. And again, we go back to the support team. The support team are incredibly important in our business. So if a franchisee finds a deal, so let's say Keith goes out and he sees 10 deals in a day, and he identifies that 2 of these deals would be potential investment opportunities. He'll go to our CRM, which again is bespoke, is something that we built from the ground up. He'll go to our CRM, he'll put the details in there. He'll request that it goes onto the app. At that point, it doesn't go directly to the app. It actually goes to his support person, and his support person will look through that property. Now, obviously, his support person had that original meeting with Keith as to what his direction was. So the first thing his support person is looking at is nothing to do with the property itself. It's all about strategy, Because if you've said that for the first 12 months, you're going to focus on HMOs or rent to rent or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this commercial conversion deal is put in front of you, then the support person is probably going to call Keith up and say, hey, Keith, what's going on here? You know, you've got a business plan. We've got a model. We know exactly how much time we need to put into this. And yet you seem to be deviating. We need to talk about this.
And Keith, I'd like to bring Keith back in here to explore that sort of combination between the high tech, the app, and the personal from your own point of view, because when we were preparing for this, it was pointed out to us that you won most supportive franchisee. So you obviously are very good at helping other people like yourself who are fairly new to the business, but then also you're benefiting from the tech, which has made ease of doing business all that better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been involved in testing a few things along the way as well, which are in development. So, you know, I think for me, from the technology side, it's great to be able to have the app to be able to market deals, and also the story that you can tell to investors with that as well, because, you know, the fact that there are 130,000 investors that are, you know, looking at deals helps you know, bring other people into the fold. The fact that, you know, there is a very easy to, or visually easy way for people to look at property and swipe left and swipe right if they like it or don't like it, you know, is a really good functionality. The other side of it is property, and I'll steal a phrase that Chris was using earlier on, but property is about networking in the end, you know, and you know, I've found that out more and more as I've gone through this journey, which is, you know, the more conversations you can have with people, even if at the time it isn't directly leading to something, actually those circle back around to you again, and people will say, oh, I remember when we met at such and such a place, you know, you said you were interested in it, or you said you were able to sell properties quickly. I've got one now, and it needs to go because, you know, I need some cash flow, whatever it may be. So, you know, I think from a perspective of networking with people outside of the source business, that's one thing, and just making sure that you do that. And actually, I'm on a bit of a networkathon at the moment. So I've done a few. I've already been at one today. I'm about to get the train after this webinar to go up to Manchester to go to a Source Investor Network event, which happen all over the country each month.
Oh, well done, Keith.
Quick plug there for Chris. I'll take a referral fee later. Yeah, so I'm about to go to that because actually, I'm looking to start my own in our region, within the East Midlands. So, you know, hopefully by the time November comes along, I'll be hosting my own in that as well. So I'm also just putting myself out there to meet lots of people who may be either likely attendees or people who can help me. The other side of internally within Sourced is, you know, I adopt the strategy, which is the more people I can help, the more people are possibly available to help me in the future. Because loads of people from loads of different backgrounds join the network. They've got loads of different connections, and you just don't know whether there's an opportunity to JV, or, you know, people every day are posting within the intranet that Chris mentioned earlier. I've got this question, who can help me? And then bang, 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 people help, and then you connect it to the right person. And I'll try and invest a bit of time in just making sure I'm talking to other franchisees to understand a little bit about what they're doing, but at the same time say, okay, well, I tried this, it didn't quite work. So, you know, if you're looking at that strategy, then go fast forward, go straight to go, don't sort of collect £100, just sort of go to that place. Don't do this, try this, do that, speak to these people. I did this, it didn't work, I'm tied into a contract, don't go with them, go with these, and so, along the way, I think hopefully people appreciate that, because sometimes you can just help them shortcut their journey.
And Chris, that's a very good example of someone who obviously paid a lot of close attention when he was doing the introduction, three-day introduction a year ago. But also, not only is he savvy with using the tech which comes as part of the Source franchise, but also old-fashioned networking, legwork. After this, going up to Manchester to see people in person. And you said before, when you were starting out yourself, privately in the property business, you would always, at a social occasion, mention you're in property. That, something might trigger in somebody's mind a few months later, saying, oh, I spoke to Chris, and didn't he say something? He knows what he's on about, doesn't he?
Absolutely. And don't worry, Keith is going to get a gold star for mentioning that he was paying particular attention to me at the introduction. So well done, Keith. Yeah, absolutely. It is a mix of those two things. The amount of technology that's in property is phenomenal these days. The amount of data that you can collect and collate and manipulate and use and extract information from is phenomenal. But if you're not doing the networking, it's just not going to go anywhere. Or it's going to go anywhere. It's going to go somewhere at a much slower pace than if you were doing that networking. So what we do is, it's quite a difficult thing, isn't it, to say you're going to meet somebody and the conversation is going to go like this. It's a very difficult thing to template that conversation. But what we do is we give our franchisees like a list of, say, 10 questions. And if you're meeting somebody for the first time, if you're meeting the vendor of a property, if you're meeting a number of different people in different situations, we try to give them a list of 10 questions to make sure that they're extracting as much information from the other person as they possibly can. And that's a standard sales process, right? You know that if you've watched The Wolf of Wall Street, do you remember the sell me this pen from The Wolf of Wall Street? Well, the right response to that is, what puts you in the market for a pen today? Because you're trying to understand the motivation of the person that you're trying to sell to, right? So we give our franchisees that kind of information, because what you tend to see for people who have not got that like innate sales ability is they just start talking about the property. I've got a property and it does this and it's going to return this and blah, 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 blah. Well, you don't know what they're interested in yet. So we put all of this, you're right, with the tech, oh no, I've got a problem with my connection. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. You're back on live. Keep going. He's frozen for a moment. Are you all right, Chris? Just while we're waiting for Chris to reconnect, I'm going to go over to Keith, because you can cover this point as well, which I was going to ask Chris about, that when you're bidding or going to source, the franchises are not territorially based. You said you're speaking to us today from the East Midlands, but you're free to look at properties across the UK. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, if Chris was online, he'd say, actually, previously there was a model that was territorial based. So you bought the franchise and then you were in a particular region. But actually, after kind of consultation and surveys and listening to the franchisees, the decision was made, actually, it's not that important. So so you'll get leads pushed through to you that are from your area, but actually you can look everywhere across the country if you want. So, for example, I'm doing some bespoke sourcing for a guy who's looking for a property in Caerphilly, so he's nowhere near where I am, but actually, we've gone, I found him a property, and, absolutely. So it can be anywhere, because actually, there are opportunities everywhere. And I think the thing that worried me about that when I first joined was, okay, so am I going to be bumping into sourced franchisees all over the place and there's going to be competition? And the reality of it is, it's just not like that. Every now and again, you might get a message from the CRM that says somebody else has got a deal in this postcode. But I'm yet to have found, and I put quite a lot of deals on there, I'm yet to have found one where you go, okay, now, this needs to be, mediated, because you're both looking at the same property. It hasn't happened to me. So yeah, it was
that's a very
nationwide opportunity. Yeah.
Sure, and that's a very clear and important explanation of just how wide potentially the franchisees are. And Chris, now that you're back, just about.
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Keith stood in and stepped up to the plate, as he has throughout the past year with you.
He's really racking up the gold stars today.
Yeah, I was going to say another gold star.
What people don't realise is when you're on these trainings, Chris gives points out to people. And at the end of the training, if you've got the most points, then you win a prize. Chris never gives me any points, and I think he's making a game out of it for himself. So maybe today I've got a chance of redemption.
You've got no competition today, Keith.
Exactly. I'm fishing in the right pond.
Yeah, but he's not giving out any points, I notice, even with the lack of competition. Chris, let's go back to, you've mentioned the thing about cash and how much investment. So is it a case that some people go to source, have the conversation with you, some of them might be bringing a big bag of cash and say, I've got this and I want to invest it in properties. Others might say, I don't have that much spare capital at present, but I think with your help, I can actually build on that capital. So you're taking all comers, provided you, having interviewed them, you think they have the right potential and the right business sense to actually make a go of it.
It's all about attitude. It is all about attitude, right? So we go through a recruitment process, and if you've got the right attitude through that recruitment process, then you've got a chance of coming on board with us. Absolutely. It doesn't matter how much money you've got in the bank, because part of that attitude is about how realistic you are. So if you're coming on board with us, or you desire to come on board with us, you've got no money in the bank, and by the end of 12 months' time, you want to have turned over £100 million, then we're gonna wish you well. We're gonna shake you by the hand, and we're gonna I encourage you to go and look somewhere else, because that just isn't realistic. However, if somebody's coming to us with a pot of money, with a bit of experience of building new builds, and they want to scale that up, and we have a number of people that have done that. We've got, a number of people. I don't think I should name them on here, but if anybody wanted to talk to them, then I can certainly put them in touch. One guy, he was a builder. He was doing loads of stuff for other people. He wanted to start doing things for himself. So he came on board with us because we have an in-house funding arm. And that in-house funding arm can lend up to 70% of the end value of a property. So for him, for his first project, he needed to put in very, very little of his own money, which was able to get him started. And after he did that first project, he made a big pot of money, and he rolled that over into his next project. And his next project was a few properties together, and he rolled that money that he made from that into the next one, and it was slightly bigger. Now he's doing a project where he's building 25 new builds. He's building a small estate. And he's only building that small estate because of the facility that we have that's allowed him to scale that up. So exactly what I was talking about earlier, people come in and they take advantage of different parts of the package that we put together. And for him, it was specifically about the funding because he had the experience. We couldn't teach him anything that he didn't already know about, building new build properties. He needed a bit of business objectivity from us, to make sure that he was financially and on track with his goals. And then mainly he needed that funding that we provided for him from Source Capital. So different people, different things, different goals and different objectives, different starting points, but it's all about that attitude.
You've got about 200 franchisees at present, but plenty of room for more, obviously. So within Source, as you say, it started in 2017, 6 years in, the ambition is as high as ever, and you think there's a lot more potential out there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, going back to, well done for explaining that point that you made earlier, Keith, on the territories. Exactly right. If Keith, you're around Leicester, right? So let's take Leicester as the example, Keith. So Keith is in Leicester. I don't think there's any other franchisee that is very, very close to Leicester. But we've got one Source person in Leicester. How many property investors do you think there are in Leicester? 1,000, 2,000? So in terms of competition, we're absolutely nowhere near scraping the barrel of reaching anything like, a saturation point. The important thing from our point of view is, though, we have a package and we have integrity. And so we want to make sure that every single franchisee that comes on board gets exactly the same treatment from us, exactly the same care, exactly the same business overview once a month, one-to-one, unlimited one-to-one support, the same number of property leads that's sent to them, the same access to the funding that they can achieve, and the ability to book onto our training. Because if they get all of those things, they're going to be just as successful. There's no shortage of opportunity within the property market whatsoever.
And I'm just going to go back to Keith Cannon now in Dublin. Have there been any questions that come in online?
Yeah, we have a few there. So Michael was asking how much capital would he need to get started, and he would be looking for full funding.
I think that's to you, Chris. You kind of, you've talked about, is it internally within your own property finances up to 70% of the total cost? But are there other options for someone like Michael who's saying, what's available to him basically?
Absolutely. Yeah, look, we've got a deal that we're funding at the moment where the franchisee is contributing nothing to that project. We're funding 100% of the purchase price and 100% of the refurb cost. Now, we've shown that franchisee how to find that deal, but that doesn't mean that those deals are ubiquitous. It doesn't mean that you can go out, Keith could go out today and find another one of those deals. What we would want to know, we need a little bit more information from Michael, to be honest. What we'd want to know is what he's trying to achieve and what his short-term ambitions are and what his long-term ambitions are. Because like I said earlier on, if Michael's got cash flow that is satisfying his monthly costs to keep him going, then potentially the first strategy that he looks at is finding that refurbishment. If Michael doesn't have cash flow, or if he wants to get out of his day job, then the first thing that we need to look at is replacing that cash flow. So we're going to look at different strategies. Now, depending on what we're looking at, depends on how much money Michael needs in his pocket. However, in every strategy that we use, if you don't have money in your pocket, you can borrow money from investors. And like I said, like Keith said, we've got 130,000 investors to come on board to supplement what you're doing. And obviously they're going to take a cut of that because they want a return. but that's always an opportunity for you. So again, it's just about being realistic. And if you do want to get to the point of being a new build developer, don't think that without any money in your pocket, you're going to get there straight away. It's about being sensible, creating a business plan and working towards that goal.
And Keith, any more?
Yeah, we have another
questions
one there. Can anyone do this even if they have no experience in property? So can they come in from any background and have a go at this, or what?
Let's give it to Keith Smith, actually, because you were doing your research, around about this time last year, looking at potential. I know you mentioned you had some limited experience as a landlord, but it's basically, as Chris said, it's attitude and having the right mindset with the backup of a structured system in place.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'd say probably two things. That I think, one, you've got to be sensible, and you've got to realise that if you're going to go into something completely new, then obviously it'll take you a little bit more time than it would if you've got some experience to get up to speed. So, Chris is very clear on the induction. Don't quit your job and start doing this and expect to be earning as much money as you were in your job before. It may be that's the case, or maybe not, but you need to have a plan where you phase things accordingly so that you can afford your lifestyle. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is, I would say, yes, you can do it. If you've got an interest in property and you've got a tenacity and a resilience and a mindset of learning, then you can do it, because you'll get the tools that you need to equip you to be able to do it. Now, some classroom training will go a long way, but 70% of your learning is through doing. So you're going to need to be brave, find something, do it, learn from it, dust yourself off a little bit, take a step back, realize what you did right, what you did wrong, and then build that into the next thing. So I think absolutely, yes, you can do it without tons of property experience. There were things that were talked about on training. I had literally no idea what was being talked about, and I kept having to stop Chris. There was a room of people. I mean, to be fair, it's probably worth mentioning this as well, because I was in a room of people. I've lost Chris. Can I wait for him so he can give me another gold star?
He jumped out on this one.
So I'll keep going on this one. So
yeah, go on. He's back. He wants to hear it now.
He's back. He's back and give me another star. So I was in a room full of people, several of which had invested significant money in other property training, and we're talking like tens of thousands of pounds. And so in the room, there's people there going, I spent a lot of money on property training. I now want to join Source because it hasn't worked for me for one reason or another, previously with this other money that I've spent. So, there were lots of people that kind of knew a little bit about what it was on paper, but they couldn't make it work. Whereas, for me, I hadn't done any of that previous other bits of training. I've just picked it up from the training that we've had, some experience. And then I think really most importantly is asking loads of questions, being kind of curious about what it is that you need to know, and asking several people questions, because several people will give you several different answers as well, and then you make your own mind up based on that, because there's some real experts within the network. You just need to know who are the right people to ask.
Good point, Keith. As we're coming towards the end, I'm just going to check with you. Any more?
Yeah, one or two more there.
Take this one.
What's the average time for a return on investment?
Chris, that's you.
I'm sure.
Okay. So I'm going to have to break it down into different strategies, because you've got to bear in mind that if somebody's doing like a rent to rent strategy because they're trying to build their cash flow, you can see a return on that within a month. Whereas if somebody's doing a commercial conversion, for example, it might take them 3 or 4 months to find the deal, 6 months to get that deal through conveyancing, 18 months to do that deal, and then let's assume that once they've done that deal, after those 18 months, they've sold them straight away because they sold them off plan with our help. So you're 2 years down the line at that point. But that's a very realistic and reasonable amount of time to take on a commercial conversion, where the end pot of money that you're going to make from that might be £500,000, $1 million. We've got a commercial conversion that we're doing at the moment where the profit margin is £5 million, right? And that's going to take us about 2.5 years to get that from beginning to end. So it depends on your strategy.
The route you're taking.
I think if you're asking that question, I'm going to assume that you need money quickly, right? You need to see a return quickly. So when you first start sourcing and trading, I'd say you're going to start to make money within 3 months. If you're doing rent to rent, It's easier to find rent-to-rent deals. It's easier to get them up and running. It's easier to fill them, and it's easier to make a return. You're probably going to see a return for that within 2 months. You're probably going to make your money back from rent-to-rent, from a rent-to-rent deal or rent-to-rent strategy focus. You're probably going to make your money back within 12 months.
But again, as you say, you have to be sensible and you have to be realistic about what's possible. Keith, over to you again in Dublin.
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely, like, there seems to be so many different routes and strategies you can take with this. So I think some of the questions there people are asking maybe would be better to, sit down and have a conversation with you guys rather, because there's so many different answers for different people. I will put a link towards the end of this, and there'll be email as well if anyone wants to get in contact with Chris or anything. But I think the questions that you've answered are probably the best ones to answer on the call. I think there's a few more that will be the recording will be available at the end and sent to everyone as well. Michael's just asked there. So
okay,
and
cool,
Chris, the last burning question of the day: any gold star for Keith Smith? I mean, he's been hinting so heavily throughout the whole conversation. Come on.
So the award that I give away depends on what I don't need in the office at the end of any training course. But I think for Keith and for how how articulately he's described his, and how honestly he's described his story, I'll go out and buy him a little trophy or something like that. There you go. I'm
ask for more than that.
Keith. Well done. 100%.
Very good.
I'm sure he will.
Post it on the internet, and I'll put it all over social media. It'll be brilliant.
But
in fact, can I just say, I went to see a franchisee the other day. They'd been with us just over a year. They're turning over something like £160,000 every single month, and they're operating out of a home office, and they've still got their Sourced award that they won after a couple of months on their shelf. So Keith, I expect to see the same from you if I get you this award.
You can. I've got one on the wall, and I've got one on the cupboard. So
good man.
I'll find a home for the next one.
Good man.
Maybe we should reconnect in a few months so that we can look at those wonderful trophies.
That's good accountability.
Chris and Keith Smith, it's been really enjoyable talking to you. And Keith Callan is going to wrap it all up for us.
Yeah, so thanks for everyone for listening today. And thanks, guys, for coming on. There'll be an email sent out after with the replay and any links to get in touch with the guys. And thanks for everyone for coming on. And thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thank you,
guys.
Cheers,
Bye-bye.
guys. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.